Hello and welcome to the 1723 podcast with me, your host, Shaun Butler. Now, today we're taking a look at Freemasonry and the United States of America, particularly the impact of the 1723 constitutions on the early foundations of that great country. To help us find out more, we're joined today by Akram Elias, the past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of Washington, D.C., and a noted expert on the subject of Freemasonry, who is known worldwide for his presentations on the Masonic history and symbolism of Washington, D.C. Akram, thank you for joining us. Now, let's get cracking. So, Akram, when did Freemasonry arrive in the United States, and how did it spread once it was there?
Freemasonry came to the United States, obviously from Great Britain. British lodges, English, Irish, and Scottish came to the colonies and established, Freemasonry there. And over time, Freemasonry expanded quite rapidly, in fact, in the colonies. And by the time the Declaration of Independence came to be and the Revolutionary War started, Freemasonry saw an incredible growth throughout, the colonies.
Thank you. And obviously, a figure that we're very familiar with, especially sort of globally, really, as a sort of leading pioneer of that period of time within the colonies and then the United States, is Benjamin Franklin. What was Benjamin Franklin's connection to the 1723 constitutions? Because in some previous episodes, we've heard that he was involved and that perhaps he was even involved in paying for the reprint of the document when he took it to the US. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Benjamin Franklin was a central figure, in fact, in spreading the 1723 constitutions throughout the colonies. He had them printed. The whole idea was to have that document spread as widely as possible throughout the colonies, because those constitutions provided the blueprint. And this is very important and unique in a way to the establishment of the United States as a great experiment in human governance.
Right.
So the constitutions provided the blueprint for the lodge structure, wherein men at that time of different backgrounds could come together and learn how to govern themselves under a set of constitutions.
Yeah.
So it was an incredible contribution, in fact, to the whole experiment that we call America.
Absolutely. And was Ben Franklin a Freemason himself?
Yes, he was. He was Grand Master of Philadelphia, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Probably, if not one of the most prominent, I would say the most prominent Freemason at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Now, I get sort of touching on the previous comment that you made in terms of the migration from the British Isles over to the United States. Would it be fair to say that the American Freemasonry at its earliest point was essentially English Freemasonry?
Well, definitely. English Freemasonry was essential, though I must say that also Scottish and Irish also played a very important role. But the constitutions, which I call the English gift, if you want, again were critical to help establish a system of governance in the United States where people would learn self-governance, because after all, in the United States, and the founders, many of whom were Freemasons, were interested, and they designed a system, designed a system of governance where the people are at the center of governance, not the government.
Of course.
So people needed to learn how to govern themselves and have government as a partner rather than a ruler.
Yes.
So the lodge was the laboratory.
Right.
And that's the gift, what I call the English gift to America.
Gift. Oh, I like that. That's nice. Now, obviously, there were, especially sort of throughout the 19th century, we're jumping forward a little bit now, but very, very large numbers of Irish migrants travelling across to the United States, as you say, Scottish as well. Did that sort of change the landscape of American Freemasonry? Obviously, we've jumped forward now, we're past the Revolutionary War. We'll go back to it in a sec. But did that sort of change 18th, 19th century Freemasonry in the US as it was? Did it have a transformative impact? What would you say that sort of impact was?
Well, there's always obviously impact with immigration coming to the United States.
Yes.
But what happened in the United States is that Freemasonry started taking its own identity, if you want, rooted in the constitutions, using the rituals. So the rituals came to us, of course, from the British Isles, the English, the Scots, and the Irish. But they became essential, again, to this construct of governance. And that's why Masonic lodges spread throughout the country. In fact, it is said that for a territory, I mean, we started with 13 founding states, and of course today we have 50 states. So the United States expanded territorially. Mainly, like for example, in 1803, when the United States purchased the Louisiana territory from Napoleon of France. So then Americans were basically encouraged to go settle the new territories. But for a territory to become a state, it was almost like a condition, unwritten, if you want. You organize your own Grand Lodge. You're able to govern yourself. You prove yourself. You can really, under your own constitutions, that makes it easier for you to really prepare yourself to be a state. The self-governance concept was essential, and that's why lodges developed incredibly, throughout in the 19th century. Incredible. Of course, we did have a difficult period, after the Morgan Affair, and we had anti and anti-Masonic party. In fact, the third national, quote unquote, party in the United States was not a party for something. It was called the Anti-Masonic Party. So it was anti-Masonry. And fortunately, the United States was able to overcome that difficult period, dark cloud. So Masonry constantly evolved in its nature, its relationship to communities. And very interestingly, it also varied from state to state because our system is not centralized. So depending on the nature, the diversity of the community, a lodge would find itself in, and how it's related to it. It's amazing. I mean, cornerstones of key buildings, places of worship, capital, which are the seats of government of various states. I mean, the cornerstones were laid Masonically throughout the country.
Now, in terms of, we spoke a little bit about, the number of people that were becoming Freemasons and whatnot. Who were these people? Were they the upper class, the richer people, the wealthier people, or was it inclusive? Did you have people joining from all backgrounds and all sort of wealth backgrounds and whatnot?
It was, I would say, much more inclusive. It obviously varied from place to place, but the whole idea behind spreading the constitutions, again, Franklin and those Masons, they wanted to be able in every town what they would refer to as the pillars of the community. But the pillars could be, the carpenter, I mean, whoever was contributing to, building the community, the pastor, local aldermen, you name it. And the idea, very important, people of different faiths would be able to come together. So religious tolerance, essential. Obviously, that's another part of the gift of the constitutions. And also the constitutions did speak about in the governance of the lodge that, you ascend based on merit. Not because of blood heritage or whatever else. So it was the place where people would come and learn, meet on the level. As we say, meet on the level, and learn that they can better themselves and progress and gain status based on work, hard work and merit. Pay their wages if any be due, as we say.
Now, we've mentioned the Revolutionary War, which I'm sure had a transformative impact, obviously, not just on Freemasonry, but American society obviously had a huge impact. Now, obviously, there were Freemasons involved, but to what extent was their involvement important, or was it important at all, or was it just a side piece to the overall story? Yes, of course, there were some Freemasons involved.
Well, no, I don't think it's a side story. There were Freemasons were heavily involved, obviously, in the war and Revolutionary War. So many of the officers, even officers that came from overseas. I mean, Benjamin Franklin, one of his key roles as ambassador of the United States to France while he became a master of the Lodge of the Nine Sisters or Nine Muses in Paris. One of his key roles was to recruit officers who were Masons from Europe to help bring them to the United States to help train the militia of George Washington. Of course, the Marquis de Lafayette, who came on his own, became Washington's right hand. So Masons played a very important role in the whole revolutionary effort, and also drafting, a lot of the documents, what we call the founding documents of the United States, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. But I think the most important, really, contribution is this idea that the Lodge could be the laboratory to experiment. That's why the founding fathers of the United States called it a great experiment.
Right.
And as George Washington said, this is probably the last great experiment to promote human happiness. I'm almost quoting verbatim here.
Yes.
So that one of the rights articulated in the Declaration of Independence, obviously the right to life, liberty, but then that pursuit of happiness.
Yes.
And any Mason knows how important happiness is.
Absolutely.
And what the purpose of the Lodge is, and how we create that sacred band of brothers among whom no contention, as we say, or rather emulation exists, except that who can best work and best agree. So it is not just the war effort, drafting documents, but essentially creating a construct of civil society.
Right. Okay.
That made the whole experiment possible. Can men at the time, because they were focusing on men, but the idea is, as the founders put it, persons. So every generation of Americans, started expanding on the definition of who is a person.
Yes.
We had to deal with slavery. That was the cancer at the start.
Yeah.
But every generation worked very hard using those documents to help advance the experiment. And what is the experiment? Can people who come from different backgrounds, different religious beliefs, persuasions, can they work together under a set of constitutions, their own rule of law, learn the art of discourse, self-governance, legislate, so they can come out of the Lodge as free, engaged citizens who can then contribute to the building of their communities. That is the most critical contribution that Freemasonry and the constitutions gave, really, to America as a great experiment. And it is constantly in the making.
Yes.
And that's why marking 300 tercentenary, as you say here, 300th anniversary is very important, because that's a time not only to celebrate, but to reflect. Whence came we?
Yeah.
What is the essence there upon which we need to build so we can reposition ourselves, to embrace a brighter future yet to come?
Yeah. Now, Akram, I'm going to read you a passage from the Declaration of Independence. It won't sound as good as it would if you were reading it. I'm going to warn you in advance.
Oh, my God.
So we'll give it a go. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as you mentioned before. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organising its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments, long established, should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Now, any Freemason listening to that will undoubtedly have picked up on a number of Masonic elements that you would have, prudence, for example, is the obvious one. Now, how important was the 1723 constitutions in the creation of later documents such as the Declaration of Independence and the US constitutions? We know, for example, that at least 16 signatories of the Constitution were Freemasons, for example.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they had a great impact on, again, drafting the founding documents. If you look at the Constitution itself, not just the Declaration of Independence, so we call, or many of us in the United States would refer to the Declaration as the promise
Yes.
This is where great ideals were articulated. The fulfillment was the actual Constitution, and then the third document being the Bill of Rights. So if you look at George Mason, a prominent Freemason, for example, who really was the main drafter of the Bill of Rights, all the rights, many of them, obviously, then there was a lot of debate going on, and finally the 13 founding states agreed to a shorter version, which consists of 10 articles.
Right.
Now, I would say, and I would argue, the most important contribution is Article 1.
Okay.
When it comes to the Bill of Rights. Because Article 1, which means the First Amendment, the U.S. Constitution, does not state that citizens have certain rights like freedom of speech. It states, Congress shall make no law abridging, limiting, or eliminating 5 natural rights. This concept of natural rights that Benjamin Franklin, as Grand Master of Philadelphia, articulated and basically said these are not a product of any government or even society. These are a gift of the creative force of the Supreme Being, therefore untouchable. So our Bill of Rights says those rights are natural, meaning no law, practically speaking, in the United States, no law can be made by any level of government that limits or eliminates any of these 5. And these are the 5 that enabled the establishment of a new construct of society. Yeah, and that is where the constitutions, again, back to 1723, provided us the lodge structure.
Yes.
The ritual that came in enabled then men in that lodge to better themselves and be able to learn the art of governance to fulfill exactly what the Declaration of Independence was articulating as a promise. So civil society, in other words, I don't have to limit myself and be limited by, where I was born, what family, what social status, what religion I was given. No one freely chooses those.
No.
So how can you be free unless you're able also to liberate yourself from those things that predetermine your identity? So a new construct of identity had to be created in the United States. What does it mean to be an American?
Yes.
The United States, I don't know, I think it's the only country, I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, but I think it is the only country on the face of the earth that has never had a government ministry of culture. Never. So our identity is not based on the traditional cultural concepts of, clan, blood, common religion, even language. We don't even have an official language in the United States, by the way. So a new construct had to be developed where people of these various backgrounds could learn how to govern themselves by themselves with a government that is their partner without destroying one another and without needing someone who would keep them from destroying one another. So that's why it's an experiment.
Yeah.
And the constitutions, the 1723 constitutions were essential. I'm telling you, nothing would have happened. The experiment would not have succeeded if it weren't for that huge contribution. So the constitutions, again, with the ritual together.
Yes.
Because obviously you've got to, what do you do in the lodge? That's where the ritual comes in.
Yes.
Both. Again, an English gift, essential to where we are. So to me, that is even more important than the actual individuals who say General so-and-so or Colonel so-and-so were Freemasons, great. But I think the contribution to the experiment, that is the most important.
Fascinating. Okay, jumping forward again to something that I think is important that we discuss, which is, as you say, sort of the cancer of slavery that was obviously prominent in a certain period of time. Obviously, American Freemasonry, I think we all think of now as being extremely diverse. The existence of Prince Hall Grand Lodges and whatnot. How important was Prince Hall as an individual to creating the environment that we have nowadays, where we consider Freemasonry in general, and in particular American Freemasonry, to be as diverse as it is?
Critical. Critical. Prince Hall, again, that's another English contribution, in spite of slavery and the attitude that existed at the time, regrettably, including Mark Mason's. Well, the English helped us, in fact, seeded 2 streams. Or enabled the seeding of 2 streams. One became known as the Prince Hall affiliation stream. The others, it's difficult to know. I call it, for a simple reason, the George Washington stream, because it's, otherwise you're going to have to go to different places between Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, and then who was first, and blah, blah. So I just, easier to say that. Given the historical context of how the experiment has evolved in the United States with the exclusion really of Black Americans.
Yes.
Prince Hall Freemasonry was essential to help create a concept of community, help Black men in their communities learn also the art of governance.
Yes.
In spite of all the challenges, against all odds that they were facing in the general construct of society in America. And you see a lot of the leaders within that community have come out of the ranks. The beauty of again the constitutions and the construct of the lodge based and its rituals based on the constitutions is that it graduates individuals, what I call free, enlightened, engaged citizens. So it's the individual who's graduating, coming out of that lodge experience, who is now contributing to building his or her community, as we say today.
Yes.
So it's not the lodge, it's not Freemasonry that is changing the social construct. No, I mean, absolutely not. In fact, that would defeat the purpose.
Yes.
The purpose is to build that human, that inner temple, that character of an engaged, free, enlightened citizen who can then help advance their communities. They can work together outside of the lodge, which is how it worked in the United States. So Prince Hall Freemasonry played a critical role in advancing the conditions of Black Americans in the United States over time.
Yes.
Again, against all odds.
Yeah. One final question for you, Akram, if we may, looking forward to the fantastic year that we have coming, 2023, as we celebrate the tercentenary of the constitutions. How widely do you think this is going to be celebrated? So obviously you speak from an American perspective. Are there going to be different events held in the United States that you're aware of, as well as the celebrations here? Because, I mean, it's been abundantly clear from everything you've told us today that this is a transformative document. This has huge implications around the world, not just in the United States. We've already heard about the importance of its spread in India, in Africa, all across the world. So how widely do you think it will be celebrated? And if not, whether it will or not, should it be or not?
Well, I surely hope that it will be celebrated as widely as possible. Of course, we're coming out of a COVID, period, which has, made it very challenging to Freemasonry around the world. But now lodges and grand lodges are getting back into it. Well, in the United States, we're speaking about it, spreading the word about it. In fact, in Washington, we'll be hosting a special event commemorating the 300th anniversary. It will be at the George Washington Masonic National Memorial in June, and it will be on June 22nd through the 25th. I know that in Europe, continental Europe, the French have taken the lead, the Grande Loge Nationale Française, and they're having a major event in March and organizing a conference that is going to attract Freemasons from the continent. And there, the idea is that how did those constitutions making their way into continental Europe, how did they impact?
Yes.
Because that's the beauty of constitutions. They're supposed to be living documents. And therefore, as living documents, they're going to impact their environment, different environments differently.
Absolutely.
So, and then there will be, I know, one big one in the UK. I believe it's going to be is it in Oxford?
Yes.
Or Cambridge? Cambridge, excuse me. In Cambridge, and that will be in the fall. So, but in the meantime, we keep talking about it, and we hope that others will join. And honestly, a celebration like that doesn't have to be limited to 1 year. The reason being, 300 years is a major milestone. Again, it's not only celebrating, it's repositioning.
Yes.
Because 300 years is a lot of years. Mm-hmm. And as we get older, as institutions get older, a lot of traditions make their way, habits, and if we are to renew ourselves as human beings, and as Masons, we're builders, and the constitutions are here to help us provide the construct, the lodge, to continue building. Therefore, as builders, we need constantly to think of the future.
Yes.
So how do we preserve the big tradition with a capital T, but then change small traditions and customs and usages, adapt them, reposition ourselves to embrace the challenges, of the future. Yes. So it's a very important milestone, and I truly believe, and here I'm talking now not just only about America. I think every free, democratic, open society needs more than ever free, enlightened, engaged citizens, both women and men, who can safeguard that freedom, that democratic governance, and that openness in their respective societies. I see the dark forces once again, history repeating itself. So I call them Masonically, symbolically, the ruffians that keep coming back. Ignorance, extremism, tyranny, constantly trying to bring us down, and we see that more than ever today. So we need, especially as open democratic societies, we are so vulnerable to these attacks from within and without. So we need citizens who know how to say, hey, that's not the way to go. That's not the way to go. Yes. While things may appear easier, more expedient to just go ahead and do it this way because we need that one person savior who's going to help us, blah, blah, blah. That is the worst recipe.
Yes.
Okay, so if we don't have that equipped citizenry, we're in trouble. So I believe the constitutions and the rituals have today can contribute a much greater meaning to individuals who want to be the guardians of freedom and democratic governance all over the world.
Akram, thank you very much on behalf of all the United Grand Lodge of England. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and speak to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, a huge thank you to Akram Elias, the past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of Washington, D.C., for taking the time to come in and speak to us about this fascinating topic. I'm sure we can all agree that that was a really interesting insight into this important part of the history of the 1723 constitutions and its undoubted huge impact across the world. Now, to all you listeners out there, we hope that you're enjoying the series so far. Make sure to drop us a tweet at the United Grand Lodge of England at UJLE_Grand Lodge. We want to hear about all the fascinating ways that you're celebrating the 1723 constitutions and this important moment in the history of our organisation. You can also tweet us on, as I say, on Twitter. You can get in touch with us on Facebook and Instagram at United Grand Lodge of England. You can drop us an email. And more importantly, you can come along to Freemasons Hall and visit the Museum of Freemasonry and the fascinating 1723 exhibition in the museum, which I'm sure you will massively enjoy. So, until next time, we will see you soon.